Hello everybody, let's talk about voicing in fugues. This is an important issue and it's a somewhat complex issue because the piano is great at being voiced. It is built to have differentiation of sound on individual notes, and that's what makes it sound good. The harpsichord and the organ don't have that ability. Yes, if you have different registrations on different keyboards, you can differentiate some stuff. You can play lines with different articulations, but you cannot actually voice on the same keyboard, in the same hand, different notes. So for example, this measure right here, if I were playing this entirely on one keyboard on the harpsichord or organ, I could not differentiate between any of these voices. They're all going to come out with the same level. Okay, so why are we so interested in voicing this stuff on the piano if we can argue that Bach didn't write this music with voicing in mind? Well, I would say that we have to voice on the piano because now that the piano has the ability to do voicing, we have to do it because the piano sounds terrible without it. Any instrument that has qualities, good qualities, distinctive qualities, those qualities now kind of have to be used or the instrument just doesn't sound like much. I mean, the superhero Thor, he has a hammer. So pretty much he now has to use his hammer in every story or he's kind of not being Thor. It's like Spider-Man, and he has to use his web because that's his power. The piano's power is voicing and the pedal, and you kind of have to use those or it really doesn't sound like much. So that's my argument for saying that we should voice. I guess I would add a second argument, which is that Bach didn't really conceive this music for harpsichord, clavichord, or organ specifically. This music is conceived in the abstract, and it's really choral music. It's polyphonic choral music. All right. So the point of it is the clarity of the individual voices, the movement, character, and clarity of the individual voices. Well, the harpsichord has its own ways of trying to differentiate those voices, and the piano has its own ways of doing that, and we have to use them. So anyway, that's my argument. We got a voice on the piano. So what I like to advise my students to do is to actually make a voicing plan. And here's how we do that. Here we are in the exposition, and we're going to bracket or circle or highlight, however you like to do it, the various voices and show at any given moment what I'm going to voice. So here at the entrance of the first subject, it's all alone, so fairly obviously I'm going to voice that. Now, let me change colors here because this will be cool. Here comes the second subject, the answer. So now I'm going to voice that. All right. Now here we have just a moment where the subject is done and nothing new is coming in. So maybe I'll just keep this going to here. That would be okay. Now it's time for the next entrance. There it is. Now we go on for a little while. See, the next entrance is here. We go on for a little while, and I have to decide what's the most interesting thing here. Well, I guess I'm going to give a good amount of sound to that so that I hear it here, tied over the bar line. Then I could either voice this upper line here or I could go with this middle line. Doesn't really matter. In fact, I could do the bass. In a moment, we're going to get the next entrance. Let's get another color here. This is really fun. Here it is. And this is followed immediately by the fifth voice here in the soprano. All right, so that's the exposition, the 5 voices, which I can now see very clearly because of my voicing plan. I can also see they come in, quite quick succession, and then there's this delay, and then boom, boom, another kind of quick succession. So writing this voicing plan actually allowed me to see something about the structure and the pacing of these vocal entrances. So I guess that's cool. Now, here we are immediately back down to four voices in this section right here. And as I said in a previous video, I'm very interested in this tie, in that suspension resolution. This suspension here is interesting to me. So there are many ways to voice that, and this could be done very individually. This guy right here, I mentioned earlier, that's known as a redundant entrance. It's not a new voice. We already have all the voices in, but it sounds like a sixth voice because it's the subject. It's in the dominant, and it would now be timed to be in the dominant if it's a sixth entrance, but it's not actually another voice. So that's known as redundant entrance. Okay, so that's the exposition. The exposition, you really should probably voice all the entrances so that we can hear that it's a fugue. If you want to be goofy and bring out, all kinds of other stuff that isn't the subject, sure, you could do that. Maybe it would be artistically cool. Nothing wrong with that, but I think it's much more sensible to bring in the subjects and answers. Now the question is, we've got all of this territory to cover and no super clear guidance on what we should do. This is where it gets very individual and where I like my students to flex their artistic muscles a little bit. Once we get down to here and this second theme comes in, okay, we need to pay attention to that. But what about all of this territory and similar places? The answer is you can voice anything you want. Yeah, a really, really long note in the bass might not be so interesting, so maybe not that. But other than that, you can voice anything you want. Here are the general guidelines I give. One is take turns. Don't just voice the soprano for 10 or 12 measures as though it were Schubert. Okay? Move around between the different voices because this is polyphonic music and that's interesting. So take turns, but also don't be too short. In other words, don't do something stupid like I'm going to voice that quarter note, then that quarter note, then this half note, then this quarter note, then this bass note, then this quarter note. That doesn't make any sense. That would be bewildering and it's just strange to listen to. So the amount that you voice before going off to another voice should be long enough to sound like a phrase. Make phrases. Right? So here we could go soprano, ya da 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 dee, dee 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 dee, ya da 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 da, and then I don't know, ba 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 ba, da 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 da, something like that. And those are all about a measure long. We certainly could go 2 measures or longer. I don't think you need to be mathematically equal with the amount of time you spend on each voice, but you need to create a kind of constant sense of interest. I have some students who they go buy the 164 pack of colored pencils and they just turn their scores into these beautiful, colorful works of art. If you're more of a minimalist, you can just bracket something that you want to voice, just brackets to open and close, and it will still work. So that's step one, is to develop a voicing plan that is interesting to you and that reflects your ideas, both about being faithful to the composer and to the style, but also just your own personal ideas about what is interesting to you. I mean, after all, why play music if you don't have something to contribute? If it's already been played perfectly by Andras Schiff or Glenn Gould, why don't the rest of us just shut up? So you have something to contribute, and it can be individual and a little bit different. Next is, when you're practicing, really bring out these different lines. especially if you're new to practicing, you're going to have to voice more than you think. So and then I would recommend recording or having a friend listen and tell you, can I hear at each of these times? Does it draw my attention when you get to each of these places? And so in this way, as you develop your voicing plan, you're developing a clear, beautiful, interesting, cohesive approach to the piece of music. And then you're building a way of critiquing and evaluating whether you're actually pulling off your voicing plan. All right, so that's a voicing plan in a fugue. Go get yourself some beautiful, brightly colored pens and pencils and have a great time. All right, see you next time.